Examining the income perception of high school students using the high school longitudinal study by Ellen Lukasik. Examining the
Do you remember 2008? The 2007-2008 financial crisis is considered to be the worst economic disaster since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Beginning with the fallout of the subprime mortgage market in the United States, a worldwide banking crisis began with the collapse of Lehman Brothers. Credit markets tightened, trade declined, the stock market plummeted, and consumer confidence was trampled. The European Union, Russia, and much of the world was left shaken. As a natural response to an indigenous variable, financial education was emphasized. New standards and curriculums were written as programs sought to educate students and consumers. Even daytime television and talk radio addressed financial topics once thought to drive away audiences.
In a highly critical article in the Journal of Social Sciences Education, Thorsten Hippie emphasized the importance of education, the impact of financial downturns on quality of life, the susceptibility of markets, and the problem of regulation. He wrote, "The financial crisis demonstrates that citizens cannot uncritically rely on political and economic elites to promote or even protect the public welfare." He advocated for problem-centered instruction that focuses on causes, key problems, and policies that block desired measures. It should be noted that student loan debt is about the only debt that's not absorbed in bankruptcy cases, and that suicide is the second leading cause of death for those in the age groups 15 to 24 and 24 to 34.
So here are my research questions. Do the perceptions of the future incomes of high school students vary significantly based on their self-reporting of being a math person, or their student gender at birth, or their self-reporting as having a time-consuming job? Also, I wanted to look at, do students who receive government assistance not for educational funding predict future earnings differently from those that do not? And have these results changed between survey years? Bounded rationality, self-determination theory, and Houston's framework for financial literacy integrate to illustrate how students develop financial understandings, how they strive for autonomy, and how they make choices in the confounds of their rationality. This acknowledges the situational and socio-demographic data that is measured in the National Center for Education Statistics High School Longitudinal Study and forms the framework from which this study was conducted and considered. The economic crisis that began in 2007 ultimately saw the loss of 8.6 million jobs. At that time, only 9 states in the Union required some form of financial literacy education for students. According to CNBC, that number has increased to 17 as of this year. There aren't a great deal of studies that talk about the educational response to the educational crisis, but according to Bardem, Hicks, and Jaffe, there's a 3.7-year lag in the response of education to the labor market. The response varies with wage signals, price signals, and occupations, but greater flexibility would allow systems to respond more efficiently. This article, however, does not specifically address curriculum in financial literacy, but it's clear that changes in the secondary education are an arduous process of submission, revision, approval, training, and implementation. There is a huge gap of published data or research that speaks to the perceptions of students' income perceptions. Gillum and Davies completed a study 15 years ago that considered the perceptions of state legislatures regarding the earning power of students following the completion of a study at a community college. Unfortunately, They did not assign actual dollar amounts to the increase in earning power. Rather, they stated the benefits as improved job skills, varying with the program and length of study, which was a small investment of bargain price tuition. What does it mean to be a math person? Generally, it means that one perceives their competence in math. According to Cribbs, Azari, and Sadler, it also influences one's interest and likely indicates one's recognition in the subject matter. Through a study of over 9,000 college calculus students, a model of mathematics identity was created that illustrates the indirect influence of competence and performance to recognition and interest. This work encourages the development of a sense of efficacy and motivation through the use of positive experiences and recognition. Though this study and analysis does not address future income perception, financial literacy, or economic grounding of math people, it does shed light on the high school longitudinal study question and student responses. To examine the relationships between secondary students, financial estimations regarding educational attainment and socio-demographic factors, a large data set with recent relevant data was preferred. Data for this study are from the United States Federal Statistics System's National Center for Educational Statistics High School Longitudinal Study of 2009. This is a publicly available data set that can be accessed online. It also includes an initial survey in 2009 and two follow-ups in 2012 and 2016 that are both currently available. This study emphasizes considerations that help students plan and make decisions about post-secondary options. To compare the means of various subsets of students, one-way ANOVA tests were run in IBM SPSS version 25. To test the assumption of homogeneity of variance, Levine's test was run on each model. Welch and Brown-Forsyth were run in case they were needed, and Bonferroni, Hochberg, and Games-Howell post hoc tests were run. Note that no two sample sizes were the same across the data. The data reflect that students perceive an increase in earnings with an increase in educational attainment. When compared with actual data from the United States Census Bureau for the same year, student expectations for a 2- and 4-year degree were remarkably accurate. Without a high school diploma, estimates were approximately $4,000 underestimated, and with a high school diploma, estimates were about $7,000 underestimated. In each level of educational attainment, females expressed their expected earnings to be $3,000 to $7,000 less than the males predicted. Ironically, these are similar to the amounts Bobby Zahar indicated in her study. This inspires questions about the gender pay gap, students' understanding of it, and why it exists. Bobby Zahar's study attributes 14% of the total gap to women's choice of college major. Are females aware and accepting of this, or would their choices be influenced by knowledge of this reality? What exactly do they know and understand about this variance in income?
So there is not a significant relationship that could be determined between the perceived income at 30 and receiving government assistance for parents. The mean income prediction for those who receive assistance was $96,146, and the mean income prediction for those who do not receive assistance was $85,894. In comparison to other earning predictions, these are remarkably high. For comparison, the mean income prediction for those on assistance in 2016 was $57,998, and the mean income prediction for those who were not receiving assistance was $71,855. As opposed to 2012, those who receive government assistance now predict lesser earnings than those who do not. However, the expected earnings are still relatively high. It's also interesting to note the difference that 4 years make. As the Obama administration was coming to an end, did students predict a change in the labor market? Was there a significant change in the financial literacy of students over this 4-year period?
As educators and policy influencers, it behooves us to have the younger generation making wise choices regarding their finances and their readiness to fill the jobs of the future. Schwab estimates that millennials will comprise 3/4 of the global workforce by 2025, and many of them are looking at us to foot the bill for their educational pursuits. There are several limitations in the survey, the data, the analysis, and the conclusions of this study. The survey does not ask questions with consistent wording across the administration years. Much data is suppressed, and many questions were left blank by respondents. How or if the dollar is normed across the country by respondents is unknown. A $45,000 income in Texas is not quite the same as a $45,000 income in New York City or California. Interpretations of variations in the Likert data are left to the respondents and may overlap. For this study, the data are used as a snapshot of the entirety of the country through financial literacy, and insights may vary greatly across the states and various school systems. If we want to understand the minds of young people, it's best to go to the source. However, students may choose not to explain or may not have the ability or insight to accurately express what they perceive. Young people have enormous pressures and decisions that they are asked to make at increasingly younger ages. If we are going to give them freedom and responsibilities, it's imperative that we give them the tools to increase their likelihood of desired outcomes. Financial education, particularly with regard to transitional decisions, needs to be thorough, timely, and accurate. Students need to understand current day labor markets, taxes and wage structures, tuition and loans, credit, the economic cycle, and post-secondary education and occupational options. As national standards for other curriculum areas have been written, this represents an area where we have mutual and collective interest, and it may be time for advocates to speak up. There is a significant gap of research with regard to the educational and financial implications of the perceptions of secondary students. The drive to identify accurate income prediction models is more for politicians and funding sources than it is for the benefit of young people making informed choices. The examination of data differences per gender, job expectations, math identity, and government assistance can be explored in greater depth. Do these influence our kids' view of the workforce, or do we? How can misperceptions be corrected while students assert independence and fearlessness? This study leaves questions about public data, questionnaire design, and suppression too. Why is seemingly innocuous, non-personally identifiable data suppressed from people who indirectly fund the studies? Where do students learn financial literacy in school? Are math teachers, economic teachers, and career and technical education teachers each assuming someone else is doing it? By restructuring current studies and aligning future ones, we can examine more intricately the foundations of students' understandings that facilitate their learning how to make their first major decisions as adults.